Hello everyone, hope you're having an amazing day and welcome to a brand new video on this channel. If you're just starting out with R, or if you're an expert who wants to build on your existing R skills, then you should definitely subscribe to this channel. In part 1 of this series, we introduced ourselves to the concept of vectors in R, looked at the steps to create vectors using the combine and sequence function. We learned how to print all the elements from a vector and also learned how to interpret the values within the small boxes to the left of the vector in our console. We also understood the concept of homogeneity and learned to determine the class of a vector using the class function. We understood how R coerces the vectors into a single data type and how we can manually change the data type using the as family of functions. And finally, we looked at the length function, which helps us to count the number of elements within a vector. This video assumes that you have already watched part 1 of this series. So if you haven't watched it, then click on the link in the pop-out banner. I've also placed the link in the description of this video. In this video, we will learn to combine, compare, sort, and repeat vectors, and finally look at the steps to create named vectors. We will first look at the manual approach to combine vectors. Say I have two vectors x and y with x containing values 1, 2 and 3 and y containing values 4 and 5. I want the new output vector to contain the numbers from 1 to 5. So the way to achieve this is to simply rewrite the vector x first and then add a comma after 3 and write y, where y refers to the second vector with elements 4 and 5. As you see, a new vector with elements from both x and y is created. Now this manual approach is not scalable to vector with thousands of numbers. Hence the next approach that we will look at will use the append function to achieve the same output. The syntax contains the lowercase name append followed by 3 parameters, in which the first parameter x is the vector within which we want to add another vector. The second parameter is value, which is the vector that we want to add inside the vector we declared in the first parameter. And the last parameter is after, which is the position after which we want to add the new vector. All the 3 parameters are separated by commas. Let's perform the previous operation again using append function. Type append and within round brackets pass the vector x to the first parameter x. Here x is the vector with elements 1, 2 and 3. We mentioned the vector x here because we want to add vector y to vector x. Next, pass the vector y to the values parameter by typing values is equal to y. Now we want y to be added after the last element in x, which by the way is the third element. So type after is equal to 3. As you see, we got the same vector that we got the last time around. We can also use this function to combine more than 2 vectors, but we will leave that to another video. Let's say I have two vectors a and b with values a, b, d and a, b, c respectively. To compare individual elements of two vectors, simply put both the vectors on either side of a double equal to sign. R will return true for all values that are equal and false for all unequal values. Note that this operation compares the first element of vector a with first element of vector b, second element of vector a with second element of vector b and so on. Overall, if you want to compare all elements at one shot and get a single output, then use the identical function. The syntax contains 2 parameters x and y that are separated by a comma and each take in a vector. Note that we can compare only 2 vectors at a time using this function. As you can see, when I pass the 2 vectors to the identical function, R conducts the same comparison that we saw earlier, but returns a true only if all elements are identical, else returns false. So say I had a third vector c with elements a, b and c. Then the identical function will return a true when I compare vectors b and c. We use the sort function to sort a vector in ascending or descending order. The syntax of the sort function takes in 2 parameters. The first parameter is x, which is the vector that needs to be sorted. The next parameter is decreasing, which if set to true sorts the vector in descending order and if left blank or set to false sorts the vector in ascending order. Both the parameters have to be separated by a comma. Let me create a vector with first 5 positive integers and assign it to a variable named a. Now I'll pass it to the sort function and set the decreasing parameter to true to sort in descending order and assign the output to a new variable b. I can sort this new vector b in ascending order by simply passing it to the sort function. As we learned earlier, we do not need the second parameter when sorting in ascending order. We can do the same for character vectors as well. Let me create a vector with 5 random English alphabets and assign it to a variable named C. When I pass this to the sort function, the alphabets are sorted in ascending order. Before we get to the next topic, I wanted to urge all of you to provide your feedback in the comments below and support this learning initiative by subscribing, liking and sharing the videos. At times we might need a vector in which the elements are repeated in a certain pattern. This can be achieved using the repeat function. The syntax of this function contains the lowercase name rep followed by 4 parameters. The first parameter is x, which is the input vector, a number or a string. The second parameter is times, which indicates the number of times the input to the first parameter x has to be repeated. We will discuss the last 2 parameters shortly. For example, I want the vector with integers 1 and 2 to be repeated 5 times. Then I can pass the vector to the first parameter of the repeat function and set the times parameter to 5. You can see the output vector on the screen. The repeat function can do a lot more than this. Suppose we want each of the elements of our vector to be repeated 2 times and overall want the entire vector to be repeated 5 times, then we can achieve this by including the each parameter to our previous command. This is the first of the 2 parameters that we did not discuss earlier. We can also control the overall length of the new vector using the length.out parameter. Using the example of the previous vector which has 30 elements, I can limit the number of elements to 10 by setting the length.out parameter to 10. This is the second and the last of the 2 parameters that we did not discuss earlier. In the last topic for this video, we will look at the concept of named vector. A named vector is just like the vectors we saw earlier, but this time we assign a unique name to each element. The syntax for creating named vectors contains one additional step, and that is to add the name of the vector. Within the combine function, mention the name within double quotes and assign a value to it using the equals to sign. Similarly, we can add a comma and add the next element and keep adding elements so on. As you can see in the output, each element has its name printed exactly above it. Cool trick here is that we can assign more than one element to a name and R will automatically give it a unique name. Let me show this with an example. Here I am assigning the integers from 1 to 5 to A and integer 6 to B. And as you can see, R gave unique names A1, A2 and so on till A5 to each element mapped to A. That's it for this video. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with your friends and colleagues who are interested in learning R. Good luck and happy learning.